Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Market Mindset. Today, we're going to talk broader economic themes and Jackson Hole starting tomorrow from August 21st to 23rd. The theme for this year's symposium is labor markets in transition, demographics, productivity, and macroeconomic policy. Now, that sounds really dry and boring. So let's reframe that and think of it more like Dune 2, where Powell whispers policy prophecy. Markets pretend to decode them. Meanwhile, Trump's camp is riding in like the rival house, saying, forget the Fed, let's back stable coins and blow up the system. It's central bankers versus populists, and we're the audience trying to guess who actually controls the spice, or in this case, the money. I think that's a bit more of a fun way to reframe what's happening here. But I wanted to look at that in kind of a more of a fun way and kind of consider that there is a lot of hype as to what's going on here. And it's, whether it's CNBC, Bloomberg, FinTwits, they look at this event as being monumental. And to some degree it is, because it's likely a very high probability Powell's last one, even though he will remain, I believe, till January 2026. Officially, there's a date where he could still remain, but people think this is the last time he'll be in public and really the last time he'll have a lot of influence. But really, in actuality, the actual trading data shows it's no more volatile than a regular Friday. Now, it's in theory for those who are active traders with positions, that it's very relevant. But really, at the end of the day, the analogy of it being a financial Groundhog Day, is more true to form as to what actually happens. Everyone gathers to see if Powell casts a shadow, but most years the outcome is pretty muted. And that's likely to happen again. I don't see a big acquiescence. There'll be some, perhaps, but I don't see it. This is just as much political as it is economic. And really, this is probably going to be kind of like watching people waiting for a fireworks show, and then they realize just everyone's in Jackson Hole holding sparklers. I think that's going to be it. But it's not just your media that's been hyping up the story. I mean, it's their job. They try to make things exciting and interesting, just as we try to make things very exciting and interesting about mining. Some sectors and discussions are a bit harder than others to get the general public too pumped about. And a meeting in Jackson Hole about macroeconomics generally doesn't get people that stoked. But it's not just the media, as I said. It's Goldman Sachs even. Even Goldman had put out that outside of individual rate decisions, this conference is traditionally one of the most prominent global central banking events of the year. Given the historical lull in central bank communications in August, Jackson Hole is the highest profile opportunity to hear from policymakers ahead of the resumption of rate decisions in the fall, with markets watching closely to gain insights on policy themes for the rest of the year. There's obviously a lot of people in the markets are glued to it, and it gives a great narrative. Everything will now be reshaped about narrative as to why the market's going up, where this is going down, why is gold going up, why is silver going down, whatever it happens to be. You need to have these narratives in order to reframe conversations. And I'm not being just pessimistic when I'm saying that, but in a large part, that's really what it is. It's pretty much kind of you look at it as being the hype really often outweighs the actual event. Kind of like a lot of UFC fights or matches like that, where just it's not going to live up. And chances are this probably won't either. Now, we had some historical market reactions in the past, though. There was the really well-known one in 2010, Bernanke hinting at QE2. That rally was hard, and liquidity really started flooding in. There was 2012 when Draghi and whatever it takes era, that spillover from the sentiment in Europe and central banks as market backstops. That was a big one. And of course, there was the 2022 Powell hawkish reset, where the market dropped, I think it was about 7% roughly in a matter of a week. We don't expect anything major like that once again. We're going to talk about a large part of this, of course, being the overall narrative of this backdrop of the politics, the Trump and the Powell. No love lost there over the years. Trump had asked him in 2019 to drop rates. Nope, not going to. And the story angle that we're seeing out there, once again, depending on which narrative, is either that he's all bad or and Powell's got to go. That's one story angle. To the other framing of Powell being a man under siege, this authoritarian rule. So the dichotomy, the contrast is stunning. But his term is basically at an end, and I think the probability from most pundits and people writing out there is that this is the last one. So it does make it historic. But this is, well, I don't know if it's arguably more political than other ones. I don't think so. But the tone will certainly be important because he has, I mean, depending how you look at him, he's under a lot of threat from Trump and pressure. And he was going to have to hold on either his convictions as to what he thinks the right play is. And we can talk a little bit about that because there is this reframing that he crushed inflation, which I don't, isn't true. I would say we'll talk about that narrative in a second. He certainly curtailed it once it spiked and stopped it from escalating. And this is that story of, are we turning back on basically free money again? Bring the rates back down to zero and let's run again, which is kind of what Trump is saying. Or are we going to kind of tighten the loose strings and deal with this massive debt that we've got? And when you run the monetary policy, it's very challenging because you've got the wishes of whoever is in charge, who's just, once again, whether you like them or not, that was a lot of money that went out, lots of trillions added to spending, and once again, we've talked about that. The argument being that, well, that's going towards the appropriate people who will be able to drive growth. And I would say, yes, if you give money to the open market, to private corporations, public domain, those companies, it's likelier to drive the economy forward rather than if you spend it on public works. But it's a fine balance. There's a fine balance. I mean, the U.S. has a lot of infrastructure they have to build. I mean, they really do. And it's tough because that's not glamour. It's not exciting. It doesn't get people too excited. What gets people excited is hearing about data centers and AI and all of these other things. And I'm not downplaying those, of course, because you know how important I know that those things are. But Powell's legacy here is very important. And it should be. I mean, this is a very significant role to have. And he's had challenging years, whether you like him or not. I mean, during lockdowns, he had to deal with that, and he's going to want to have that his reputation, the way he's looked at, is viewed in a certain way, and that's why I think it's unlikely he's going to just acquiesce at the last stage, at the last speech, at the last time. But he is under a ton of pressure because of this whole administration, and they have a very active push with stable coins, with crypto, to kind of act as a branch of end the Fed. And they've got a lot of vocal support. And we can throw in the gold side of things as well, in that as well, as this kind of saying, listen, this system might be blown out. It might be coming to an end. And that isn't even just the, like, if you want to think it's the right-wing conspiracy crowd, that's like a Ray Dalio. If you follow hedge funds and whatnot, Ray Dalio was, founder of Bridgewater, one of the biggest hedge funds out there. He is a very interesting philosophical thinker. He's a Stoic. He writes on Stoicism. And he writes on the global macro outlook, and there is a lot to be concerned about. There just simply is, as far as numbers go. You can't continue to push money printing at the rate that you're going unless you have the rest of the world like sewn up, like unless you have complete dominance over it, which they don't right now. Owning the printing press is critical, which the U.S. does, but and you see that Trump coming down with the hammer, saying anyone who deviates, if there's any more expression of BRICS, if there's more attempts to come off of the US dollar system or pivot from the system, he's going to come down on them. And right now it's with tariffs. And I would say arguably that is the right move, whether you like it or not. I'm not a universalist. I'm not a kind of on the left version of we're all the same, open borders, and there's no such thing as a nation or country. I don't believe in any of that. So you need to have stability in the market, and the U.S., whether you like it or not, provides that. And I would much prefer to see a strong U.S. than any of the counterparts that might rise up. And when he is attacking at both ends of a populist movement of end the Fed, which is very strong and very, very strong, especially amongst young people, is this acknowledgement that a lot of their future is being taken from them. And the more money printing that happens, the more that emphasizes that. Also, the fact that the rate of inflation spiked so hard, even if you just went off the government data and you believe the government data, which we've done plenty of work showing that those were subdued or gerrymandered, to say the least. You just have to wait out those in favor of things that reflect better on your government than not. So, for example, like the cost of phones and a lot of technology has stayed pretty reasonable over the years. Like you could buy a big screen TV back whenever I was young, and it would cost you $1,000. You can still buy an incredible big screen TV if you use them, or a monitor for $1,000. Things stayed quite the same, and they're going to put a lot of weighting into that. So any kind of technological type stuff, which I would say is luxury. Though your cost of living, the actual cost of living, where your housing, your energy, your food, your milk, your meat, has drastically increased to quite a huge expense. So, you can make the numbers look like the inflation isn't that bad whenever you put more weighting in one rather than the other. And especially in the housing market in the U.S., when you see the cost of insurance skyrocketing, all these things that are behind the scenes that are added into owning a house or owning a car or owning things has become much, much more difficult. And I'm not knocking either way. I mean, it's been a tremendously difficult term for Powell. And, you've got, just outside of the politics part, economics, a massive deep divide between the modern and monetary theorists and the Austrian school that exists anyway, that don't get along. And they're very, opposing belief structures, which makes the discussion that much more difficult to enter into. And it's also why people like it, because a lot of people can have a lot of say without having to do a ton of research, which is true to a large extent. And at the end of the day, economics is kind of like psychology. It's using financial markets as a way to understand human behavior. So it isn't science. It isn't like financial modeling where you can look at exact numbers of revenue coming in and out, and you can determine with pretty good reflection of what someone's sales might be in the future, and you can do ratios. That type of finance is much more backed in math and probability and whatnot. Economics, at the end of the day, you're dealing with people and decisions and politics and monetary theory. It is much more in the realm of where the social science, where they say, oh, we're applying science to this. Well, yeah, but it isn't science. It isn't backed by math. They apply some math. Don't get me wrong. There's going to be a lot of economics majors getting mad. They do apply financial models and math to it, basically to make it seem like it's more of a finance course than it is, but it isn't. They're very different. Now, there is this framing too of the crushed inflation type of narrative from Powell, and some people. I think there was an article as well that even referenced Volcker, and for those that don't remember, Paul Volcker was the Fed chair from 1979 to 87. That was a horrific period of time for inflation, double-digit inflation. I think 14% CPI in 1980 alone. Gold was down at like $100 or something, $150 or something like that. They hiked the Fed funds rate to 20% and deliberately caused a recession. That was the goal. Outcome: inflation collapsed to 3 to 4% by the mid 1980s. Very challenging time. It's hard for people to get their head wrapped around what a rate of 20% would look like. That's very, very painful to have done that. And that's the legacy, is that it was painful but decisive. And he is, to a large extent, as far as the narrative goes, remembered as the man who broke inflation's back. Now, some people are trying to liken that story to the Jerome Powell from 2018 to today, because he faced inflation peaking at apparently 9%. I think it was much higher than that after lockdown, stimulus, and supply chain shocks and energy shocks and whatnot. All of the narratives, Nord Stream 2 being blown up and sabotaged. And what has happened is that they raised rates from 0% to 5.5%, fastest hiking rate in 40 years. So yes, extreme, decisive action. And the outcome, inflation cooled from 9% to 3% in 2024, 2025. Now, there's plenty of people who really follow inflation and rates and would say that these numbers are skewed. They're not even reasonable. But the narrative of, yes, they exploded and spiked and they have cooled is true. Regardless of what you think those specific numbers are or should have been, there was a massive spike up. They've leveled off now, and the rate of growth is now slowed down. So now, did the price of things come back to normal? No. That's why we always try to remind people that are new to looking at economics or the markets, is that they look around, they go, well, wait a second, you're telling me inflation is low, but everything still costs a fortune. Yes, because inflation is just showing you what the rate of growth is right now, today. It doesn't mean that things go back to normal, to what you were paying before the massive spike. And they never will. Things won't. And to some degree, a lot of bigger organizations out there, whether you choose to believe them or not, have told you the West is going to pay a lot more for a lot of things. That's the goal of a big narrative. If you are one that's a globalist perspective or World Economic Forum, UN type of perspective, where it is that the West has to pay for the rest of the world. If you're on side with that, well, then you don't mind. That's the narrative, is that basically we have to pay a tax on everything so the rest of the world can catch up. And that's fine. That can be your policy. If that's your framework, I understand it. And I don't agree with it. But once again, it's not for me to say I agree with it or don't. It's pretty obvious that I wouldn't. But the narrative, basically, that he had crushed inflation, no. He really slowed the rate of inflation, and really people feel poor because wages haven't caught up to the cost in housing, energy, food, the basics, like the actual cost of living things. Having a big big screen TV or a new Apple phone every year is really irrelevant. That matters whenever times are great, but whenever most people are massively in debt and are not looking that bright, in Canada in particular, but even in the U.S., the large portion of people aren't doing great, even though the economy is spurring a bit more, and we see that the markets are doing very well, and there is optimism. It isn't trickling down, because people aren't. We're not seeing the newer jobs take into effect, and in part some that Biden would have started to influence with driving the CHIPS Act and whatnot. A lot of that takes time to catch up. So we want to be fair to say that there was a lot of programs and money to go out in grants and funding to help drive innovation and to drive some employment into these sectors that especially the West needs, especially if you want to build out if you have any hopes of having these data centers and energy and whatnot. So wanted to kind of just put that into perspective, but it really is a big, dramatic kind of moving narrative because of the Trump and Powell relationship, I guess we could say. But overall, when we look at things, I think it's best to look at the thing as being that it's really about narrative control, and really who controls the story of money more than just what's going to happen in the next day or two. Powell wants to show that the Fed is still in charge, and politicians and crypto promoters are trying to write a new script. And believe me, both have ardent promoters or advisors, in regards to this, and strong opinions on it. And I think it's a very challenging time because I obviously am not a huge fan of a lot of the crypto story or any of that kind of angle. I also, I'm not a huge fan of the story of the Fed, to be perfectly honest. I think that the dollar is in trouble. I believe there's a huge opportunity in crypto. Don't get me wrong. We have an administration that's going to pump it. But I don't, we've talked about it in the past. I've kind of left it alone for a long time because it just, quite frankly, doesn't really interest me. It doesn't captivate me. I think because I'm more of a sound, reasoned person. I'm a bit more traditional, I guess you'd say. That's why the idea of, end the Fed is a bit much, but a return to sound, investment into commodities, the things that make things, a reliance on your precious metals. These things do resonate with me as a bit more reasonable and cautious approach. For those that are a bit more really into like kind of excitement and trends and whatnot, yeah, your crypto story is going to be amazing. They're going to be fun. They're going to be exciting because everybody likes the idea of we're creating a new system. And it's possible. I mean, the team that's behind Trump has the ability to do it, and not that it's going to be that easy. And the overall theme with digital payments and there being some sort of new system, I mean, that is a big macro theme. It's a huge undertaking. I think that over the next couple of years, we're going to see either proof that there is a legitimate system that could work. I haven't seen that played out, but once again, I don't follow it as much because, quite frankly, there's a lot of issues that have to come to terms with. And, it is true that possibly crypto could play a role in offsetting some of the expenses or certainly mitigating some of the costs associated if you were to do a transition of that kind, which is why I say it's possible. It isn't where I want to frame the most of my conversations. And that means that I can't ignore it. It is a big part. And I have to be very cognizant of it since we're trying to reach a lot of young people that are showing interest in economics and monetary policy, the realization that the debt load is so ridiculously high. It's great that a lot of people are interested in how this is working or not working, and that we're teetering at a very dangerous place. It's rough that we're there, but it's also interesting if we can apply lots of new ideas and thoughts, regardless of the politics part, and to go, would this work? Like, would a crypto system work? I haven't seen a framework where it does, but I'm open to it. Is the world going digital? 100%. It should. I think there's a lot of politics in the way that's framed with, well, they'll have control over your account. Listen, we know in Canada, they have control of your account at any time they want anyway. If any president, prime minister, they'll do whatever they want. We've seen that in Canada. That's supposed to be a democracy, with what they did with the truckers. They went in and immediately told the banks to close their accounts. Now, that got them into a lot of trouble worldwide, even with their progressive compatriots. So if you know that they'll do it on the extreme left, then you can bet that that's a possibility on the right. And you don't need to have a digital dollar for that to happen. They can just do it. They just call up a bank and say, stop it. And we saw that in the US. Most people don't know this, deplatforming people all the time. They still deplatform people who have political opinions they don't like. Banks will stop catering to them. That happens throughout all of the West, whether it's Europe, in Canada, US. If you hold an opinion that they don't agree with, they will deplatform you and they will debank you. That's worrying to a lot of people on the left, not because they were doing it to people that had opinions they didn't like, but because they realized, oh boy, it might happen to us now. And I won't say it won't, because there is a bit of a retribution phase here. In any event, we're getting into too much of the narrative side and politics side, but I wanted to touch on a bunch of those things because this does look like a bit of a movie. It is a lot of narrative. It's a lot of hype. I don't think the movie is going to end up being as exciting as people think. But those macro themes are going to be in the limelight over the next couple of years. And whoever takes the role, it will be very interesting to see. And we're going to see things develop. We're going to see things develop in crypto. We're going to still see things, with the gold angle as well. But so that's what we want to be watching, this overall macro theme, because largely mining is going to be the backbone to all of it, regardless. Extraction for metals, minerals, gas, LNG, you name it, critical gas as well, things like helium and whatnot, xenon. These are going to be required to meet the expectations of AI and all of its discoveries that it's going to make, whether it's in biotech, genomics, in robotics. It's going to take a ton of metal. And that fits into the theme we've been talking about for years, and it's done as well. And we're going to continue doing that and having that conversation. Tell us what you think will happen in Jax's Hole. Throw in a comment, and then let's see if it lives up to the excitement and hype. We'd love to see what your expectations are, what you think if it'll be a 50-point drop or a 25-point drop, or maybe he'll hold steady. Who knows? There's lots of opinions out there. And listen, at the end of the day, we'll look forward to seeing what happens. And perhaps I'll be wrong. Perhaps fireworks will go off. In any event, it's a little bit of drama there for everyone into the end of August to get us ready for the fall. Things pick up in the fall, certainly in our business. And we appreciate you spending the time with us this summer, and we'll look forward to chatting with you next week.